How do you follow that? Thank you, Ron. My wife is keeping me on track here, and I think a loose paraphrase of what she just said is, you're going to lose your audience if you don't give them a minute to go get dessert. So if y'all want to take a couple of minutes if you're wanting desserts. I think it's right over there. Yeah, I know that was a loose paraphrase. If y'all want to take a couple. It's interesting that what Ron has just said kind of dovetails a little bit with what I'm going to say. It's interesting how that works out. And I'm a writer and editor, so I'm constantly rewriting, and so that's what I'm doing right now. Except I'm doing it on my feet instead of a pen. But it's interesting what he said about looking around the room and the people who were there. In the '90s, Joanna and I were at a church that was gradually going more and more towards fundamentalism. I was the pest in Sunday school, trying to, when the subject would lend itself to it, I would try to bring up some of these Baptist issues. I would usually get blank stares. I came to some TBC meetings, met David I think one time, but didn't really get to know him, didn't get involved a lot back then in the '90s, but saw what happened and everything, and I was trying to fight the battle in my own church. And it was lonely, and I'm sure there are a lot of people around this state who fought similar battles, and you can say the same thing, that it was lonely in their churches because people didn't understand, they didn't want to understand, they didn't care, and so it was tough. But I asked to say a few words tonight about David and the Laity because that's my story, but it's a little later than some of these because really dates from about 2000 when I started really getting involved in Baptist life outside my own church. From the many laypersons I've met at TBC meetings, BGCT meetings, and the like, it's apparent that I'm just one of hundreds of laypersons whom David Currie has encouraged and helped to get involved in Baptist life over the years. I can't tell their story, I can only tell my own, but in a way I think it's probably their story too. There are many of you in this room who have been friends and encouragers to me over the last 10 or 11 years, and I'm grateful to every one of you. I could never adequately express how much that's meant to me. I can only say thank you. But there's one encourager who has had by far the greatest impact on my journey into and through Baptist work, and that's David Currie. And let me tell you why. My friendship with David dates back to a letter I sent him in the fall of 2000. A few months earlier, I had sent a letter to the pastor of the church where we had been longtime members. We'd been there by that time about 13 years. And I was challenging him on actions that were obviously moves toward fundamentalism. He was saying things like, we want a task force to reevaluate our relationship with the BGCT, things like this. Over the next 4 years, that pastor and I continued to clash until in the summer of 2004, Joanna and I finally decided it was time to leave. It was through another of my encouragers, my dear friend and David's best friend, Phil Strickland, that we found Wilshire and joined here, and thank God for Phil Strickland sending us in this direction. But back to 2000. That fall, I wrote David Currie telling him about the situation in my church and enclosing a copy of the letter that I'd sent to the pastor. David, at that point, didn't know me from the man in the moon, as we used to say, but he soon got in touch with me, and we began talking regularly. David has since been responsible, either directly or indirectly, for every opportunity I've had to serve in denominational life. All I ever wanted was a chance to contribute, to serve Christ the Baptist way. In 2001, David told me about Texas Baptist Laity Institute mentor training. I attended the training and taught a couple of courses several times. One was church history. The other, my favorite, was Baptist heritage and distinctives. Anybody that knows me knows that that would be my favorite. That experience forced me to study Baptist history and principles in greater depth than ever before. In early 2002, Ray Vickery at Royal Lane called me to ask if I'd be interested in serving on the executive board. Now, I have to make a confession here. And this is really embarrassing because there are a lot of BGCT people in the room. Charles Way is right here. And it's very embarrassing to make this confession, but I actually asked him, what executive board? That's how much I knew about Texas Baptist life. Ray said, the BGCT executive board. And then I asked the second question. I said, how in the world did you get my name? The answer, David Currie. I served a 3-year term and had experiences like voting to offer a safe haven to missionaries who had lost their place in the SBC after being required to sign the 2000 Baptist Faith and Message, and voting to begin endorsing chaplains after the SBC Chaplains Commission ceased endorsing ordained women as chaplains. I got to hear Charles Way speak at every executive board meeting, and it was a blessing. I got to hear the president speak. My favorite, it still stands out to me, my favorite was when Bob Campbell delivered a simple message entitled, I Love Church. I'll never forget that. It was great. But I never would have had those experiences if not for David Currie. During those 3 years on the executive board, I began building new relationships in Baptist life and learning about how Baptist work gets done. In January 2006, I was talking with a friend in the foyer of Park Cities Baptist Church while waiting to enter the sanctuary for Foy Valentine's memorial service. Foy was one of my encouragers too, except his brand of encouragement was the typical Foy candor. We had met for lunch back in 2003, and I wanted to share with him what was going on, my frustration in my church, and Foy said, "You'll never convert that preacher." As usual, Foy was right. I gave up the battle about a year later. But as I stood in that foyer waiting for Foy's memorial service, I saw David Currie walk to one corner of the foyer and motion me over. When I got over there, David said, "If you'll take it, the TBC board voted yesterday to elect you as a member." Here was David Currie again, making sure I had an opportunity to serve. Then David quite unintentionally afforded me another opportunity, if you want to call it that. In the fall of my first year on the TBC board, he sent an email to the board that, how do I put this delicately, was rather grammar and spelling challenge. Imagine that, David Currie. Now I'm a writer and editor by trade, and I'd done a little editing for David a couple of years before that. So I emailed David and I said, "David, in the future, you really need to send this kind of stuff to me first and let me look it over. Please, be careful what you ask for." Before I do it, I'd become David Currie's editor.
I'd lost Phil.
But one of the best compliments I ever got was during a TBC board conference call one time, and David said, Bill is doing what Phil used to do. He'll say, "David, you can't say this, you can't say that." And I thought, be compared to Phil Strickland, especially with David, with how I know David felt about Phil, I'll take that in any regard. One of the best compliments ever. So I became David Currie's editor. I have received many expressions of sympathy for that over the years, but in truth it was a joy and I miss it. In January 2007, David wrote the first of more than 100 editions of the Rancher's Rumblings, and I edited every single one of them, some more than others. It was a challenge, but it was fun, because David consistently came up with the most interesting subjects, and often very interesting titles, such as Real Baptists, Crazy Goats, and Lessons Learned. Thoughts on Elvis, and CBF. And my favorite, Seeing God in a Life of Skunks, Diesel Baths, and Barn Apartments. But there were the poignant ones as well. The Heart of Charles Way, Herbert Reynolds, My Hero, and Missing Phil. In January 2008, at David's recommendation, the TBC board asked me to take over responsibility for all TBC communications. Then last year, as our board was meeting regularly to discuss how to move forward following David's retirement, David got in touch with Michael Bell, who had become our chair, and said, "One thing you need to do is make sure Bill Jones is involved in some way." Michael and I had worked closely together on several initiatives in recent years, and Michael knew well my passion for TBC's mission. It's mutual. Michael is the person to whom I've turned repeatedly over the past 3 or 4 years when I believed something needed to get done. So David's encouragement was all Michael needed. Michael and the board soon asked me to become Associate Executive Director. Finally, one other place in Baptist life that I found is I was elected 3.5 years ago to membership on the T.D. Maston Foundation board. And I have a legacy with that because my dad was one of Dr. Maston's doctoral students, and my dad started the Maston Foundation. It was his vision. But that's not why I got elected to that board. I got elected to that board because of my service through the Laity Institute, the BGCT Executive Board, and the TBC board. All through that man sitting there. All along the way, it's been David Currie, believing in me, working with me, and seeing to it that I had a place to serve. My story is the story of hundreds of laypersons who have found places to serve in Baptist life because David Currie believed in them and helped them make the right connections. Texas Baptists are richer because of the increased involvement of the laity, just as Ron was talking about a while ago. And David Currie's investment in so many people has been key to that involvement. So David, my dear friend, on behalf of all the laypersons who go along with, many, many thanks.